Back in the 20th century, which was only 13 years ago, but some of you are younger than 13, so never lived there. But for those of us who lived in the 20th century, there were two human feats that were thought to be unachievable. There were a lot of technological feats, like could we go to the moon, could we break the sound barrier, all those things. But two human feats, achievements that were thought unachievable in the history of the world. And they were both accomplished in the 20th century. The first was this. It occurred in May 29th, 1953, the climbing of the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. People had tried to climb that pup for a long time. And it wasn't until Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay climbed it and got there on May 29, 1953. And the world realized that you could climb the tallest mountain. Elizabeth and I have flown around that mountain on a little plane 2 or 3 times, and it is scary how big that thing is. And yet they did it. The other feat was this, that occurred in the same 12-month period, May 6, 1954, and that was the breaking of the 4-minute mile. Since they started timing races somewhere in the early 1800s, it was never thought that they could break the 4-minute mile. They got within 4 seconds many times. 4 minute, 4 seconds. Could never break the 4 minute, 4 second mark. And there were actually 4 men who thought they could break it. There was a guy in Australia named John Landy. Then there were 3 guys who trained together in the Amateur Athletic Association of Britain. Their name was Chris Brasner, Chris Chataway, and Roger Bannister. And they realized that if they fought against each other, they would never do it. John Landy might do it. And they said, let's win it together. Now, who actually won the race? Does anybody know? Roger Bannister. Well, but it was actually a race that 3 guys did. Let me explain it to you. They decided that it would be May 6th would be the day. May 6th, months ahead, they said, this is the day we're going after this. The day, it was raining. There were 25-mile-an-hour winds. Roger Bannister said, let's not run it. The announcer on the radio was a guy named Harold Abramson. You may not remember that name, but he was the guy that ran against Eric Liddell in 1924 of Chariots of Fire fame. You remember that story? He was the announcer on the radio. The announcer to the crowd was a guy named Norris McWhitter. You may not know who he is, but he's the guy that went to, right after this race, loved it so much, went to a little brewery named Guinness and said, why don't we put all the world records together in a book? And he's the guy that edited the Guinness Book of World Records. So this is the setting. And here's the setting. What they realized was 4 laps, quarter-mile laps around a track. Everybody could do the first lap in a minute, the second lap in a minute, the third lap in a minute, and then the 4th lap usually was 1:04. And they kept working this and working this. So this is what these 3 guys decided to do months ahead. Chris Brasner, Chris Chataway said, Roger, we're going to let you win the race. They determined who would win the race on May 6th, months ahead. Chris Brasner said, I'm going to run the first 2 laps in under 2 minutes. I will do everything I can to pace this race for under 2 minutes. And so they practiced and practiced. He knew to the 10th of a second how fast he was going. Came around the imaginary finish line, came around again. And at that point, Roger would be in 2, Chataway would be in 3. Chataway would come forward and do the 3rd lap in a minute. He knew exactly how to do it. And then as he passed the 3rd lap, Roger would spring out, like they draft in NASCAR nowadays, spring out and do the last lap by himself. Without the drafting, they decided they would draft each other. Without the drafting, and Roger would fly around the 4th lap and beat it. And he did. 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. All because of Chris Brasner, Chris Chataway, who paced him. Now, there are people in this room who are older. We have a large congregation and a very wide congregation. John talked about legacy. And here's the reality. I'm standing on Pastor Hubbard's shoulders today. He stood on other people's shoulders years before that. There are people that are going to stand on our shoulders after John and I are on the rocking chair out in Colorado someday looking at the Rockies. But here's the point. Some of you are here and you're going, we're not running a mile race with you guys. We may not even be here next year. But would you pace us? Would you be willing to run one lap with us? Maybe God will allow you to run 2 laps. Maybe he'll allow you to run 3 laps. I don't know. We're going to keep going. But we need every single person in this room to be a part of All In. This is not just about the families. It's not just about the children. It's not just about the youth. It's not just about our life group leaders. It's about every single person. Yes, there'll be people here that'll be here for 20 or 30 more years. But some of you may only be here for 2 or 3 more weeks. Would you help us? Because I believe this church can make a difference in this community of faith right here in this room, in this community of South Florida, and around the world. Do you believe that? That is what we believe here.